In China, the idea of owning a private car was almost unheard of 40 years ago.
In China,
For most people in a country where private cars still don't exist, the journey to work is still by flying pigeon bicycle.
China's auto industry went from being pretty unknown to being the world's biggest car market very quickly. This has changed the global auto scene and created good chances for automakers all over the world, including those in the US. For many years, foreign automakers, including American firms, took advantage of China's fast economic growth and growing middle class to make a lot of money and build a strong market position. But recent events and changing dynamics in China's car industry have made it hard to predict what the future holds for foreign automakers in the country. There are a lot of reasons for this increased fear, and the idea that foreign automakers will not be able to stay in business in China for long.
China, and for the same reasons they're losing in China, they could very easily lose globally.
Automakers from around the world agreed to follow strict trade rules so they could reach a fast-growing market of more than 1 billion people. They also taught their new Chinese partners how to make cars. At first, the business was profitable. Foreign companies used to be well-known and respected, but Chinese companies quickly caught up, pushing foreign companies to the edges. The market today doesn't work like the stereotype of a business owned by the government. A lot of the big companies are privately owned, so they can do what they want and are very competitive. New models hit the market much faster, and for a lot less money than their global peers. Chinese buyers are becoming more and more loyal to homegrown brands, and the CEOs of these companies keep in touch with their customers directly.
Unlikely that once you've been dethroned, that you'll regain any power in the market.
Even though things are tough, some people say that foreign companies, even American ones, should work harder.
Don't compete in China, then what are you going to do when China shows up in your backyard? How do you know how to compete with them? You haven't even tried.
A huge market. Late 1970s and early 1980s were important years for China's auto industry, because that's when the country started working with foreign companies to make cars in China. During this time, two major partnerships formed, one between a Chinese car maker and an American company, and the other between a Chinese automaker and a German company. These partnerships showed that China wanted to modernize its auto industry and meet the growing demand for cars in its growing economy. Even though the industry was still very new, these relationships made it possible for cars to be made in China and for cars made in China to be sold on the market. The Volkswagen Santana, a model made in partnership with the German company Volkswagen, was one of the first cars to leave the factory. When it first came out, the Volkswagen Santana didn't sell very well. Only 1,700 cars were bought. These sales were mostly driven by buyers from the government and other institutions. This shows that there weren't many consumers and cars weren't very popular in China at the time.
Concept of a family car or a private car. It wasn't, nobody was even allowed to buy cars.
The automobile industry as it exists today is a product of reforms that took place in the 1980s and 1990s and opened up new opportunities. It was in the year 1994 that a significant Chinese planning panel formulated the automotive industry policy, which is sometimes referred to as the 1994 Auto Policy. Under this legislation, car manufacturers from other countries might own up to 50% of a joint entity with any Chinese car maker. Each international business could only establish a maximum of 2 joint ventures for each category of automobile. In the years that followed, regulations made it simpler for foreign automobile manufacturers to use components that were readily available in their home countries in order to produce automobiles that were up to par with international quality requirements. At the time, General Motors was the most successful automobile manufacturer on the market. Through a partnership with Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, they began manufacturing automobiles in China when the year 1997 rolled around. As China's economy became more open and expanded, there was an increase in the number of automobiles sold.
And around 2000, 2001, China finished its negotiations to enter the WTO, and that gave more security and reliability, predictability to foreign automakers.
When compared to what they were before, sales have increased by a factor of 10 in a period of less than 10 years. China had the largest automobile market in the world at that particular year. Rise and fall. General Motors' success in China during the market's peak years from 2014 to 2018 showed how serious the company was about taking advantage of the huge growth opportunities in the Chinese car market. With a growing middle class and a booming economy, China became a major battlefield for automakers around the world who wanted to cash in on the rising demand for cars. During this time, General Motors had really great financial results. Its businesses and operations in China brought in an amazing $2 billion every year. General Motors sold an amazing 4 million cars in China in 2017 alone, which is an amazing feat that topped its sales in the US by about 500,000 units. This extraordinary success was made possible by strong sales. Out of all of General Motors' brands, the Buick name became the biggest success story in China, where it dominated the market and led to huge sales growth. Buick was incredibly famous in China, where it made up about 80% of all sales worldwide. This huge number showed how badly Chinese consumers liked the brand.
GM used to be the poster child for an awesome US-China relationship. At one point, the CEO from GM China told me, here in China, we're making more money than God. Things are great. Chinese people love our Buicks. We're bringing Cadillac soon. And it looked like there was going to be a forever annuity for the big three, GM, Ford, and Jeep in China.
It is obvious that things did not go according to plan. It is easy to see how rapidly things have changed with a cursory examination of the market share held by international automobile manufacturers in China. The sales of General Motors in China have been gradually decreasing ever since they reached that peak performance. They had reached 2.1 million automobiles by the year 2023, which was lower than their sales in the United States for the first time since this year in 2009. To reach $446 million in 2023, General Motors' equity income from the country, which indicates how much money the company makes in its second largest market, experienced a 34% decrease. During the fourth quarter alone, it experienced a staggering drop of 54%.
Things have been downhill and accelerating downhill, so much so that GM sales are down by more than 50%, Ford's down by more than 60%, and Jeep has actually gone bankrupt in China and had to get out. So in the last 5-6 years, we've seen just a disastrous, outcome for the Detroit 3.
It's very abrupt, it's very sudden, but I think it shows the maturity, basically, of these Chinese competitors.
How it took place. Now let's get into the matter. The Chinese automobile industry has really ramped up their game to get things started.
Chinese firms first started exporting, and they started too soon, as the Koreans did 30 years earlier. They didn't have the requisite quality. They failed miserably in many crash tests, particularly in Europe. And the internet was full of pictures of Chinese cars crumpling like tinfoil. 5-10 years later, they have extremely good results in crash tests, and you don't hear a word about it.
A significant portion of this advancement was made possible by the valuable lessons that Chinese automobile manufacturers gained from their competitors in other countries. Bill Russo, a former executive at Chrysler who is now located in Shanghai and works as a consultant, has a perspective that is somewhat distinct from the majority of people. According to him, cross-border investments made by Chinese and non-Chinese investors were very significant in the process of developing names that are competitive throughout the world. The importance of these investments may even be greater than the importance of joint ventures. In 2005, for instance, Nanjing Automobile Group purchased the well-known British brand MG, and the company began manufacturing automobiles the following year. At a cost of $1.8 billion, Geely purchased Volvo from Ford in the year 2010. Promptly after that, they transformed the Polestar performance line into a distinct electric vehicle series. Additionally, Geely expanded its product line by purchasing Lotus, a British sports car manufacturer of automobiles. The American investor Warren Buffett initially invested in BYD in 2017. However, he has since reduced the amount of money he owns in the company. There are some of these well-known names that are privately owned, which means that they did not exist solely as a result of joint partnerships. It would not have been possible to bring about this shift without the assistance of the government. To achieve its goal of surpassing established enterprises, China invested a substantial amount of capital in electric vehicles, EVs, amounting to approximately 200 billion yuan, which is equivalent to approximately $27 billion. By way of illustration, BYD received nearly $3.6 billion in direct support between the years 2018 and 2022, with a significant portion of that amount coming in the most recent year. It was not only a sensible commercial move, but it was also necessary to make this investment immediately away, in order to remedy China's major air quality problems that have been caused by decades of industry growth.
The Chinese felt that they had a hard time competing with the Western and especially Japanese companies with internal combustion engines because then it would be hard to catch up. So they decided they would leapfrog and go into electric vehicles, and this is an area in which nobody was proficient.
In the midst of the worst of the financial crisis that occurred in 2008, the Chinese government invested over $586 billion in various transportation projects. These investments resulted in the construction of a statewide high-speed train network, expansions of airports, and most crucially, improvements to roadways. Immediately following that, actions were taken, such as reducing taxes on automobiles with a smaller engine size and providing sales bonuses in rural areas the following year. For the next 2 years, 8 objectives were established by a new policy: increasing the production and sales of automobiles, as well as providing financial support for research on electric vehicles, EVs, plug-in hybrids, fuel cell vehicles, and electric vehicles are the objectives. As a result of these astute investments, China has a significant advantage, particularly considering the fact that a significant number of the suppliers, including those that supply essential minerals, are Chinese.
Chinese firms are really leading the world in battery development and battery production. And there's a tendency in the US, again, to think that this is all a matter of subsidies or cheap labor or lousy environmental controls, and all those things have some role to play, and particularly played a role in the past, but it underestimates the degree to which Chinese dominance is based on technical capacity.
Batteries and motors aren't the only things that China excels at producing when it comes to automobiles. Taking advantage of the country's expansion in the cell phone and technology industries, businesses in the country have grown particularly skilled at the production of software and entertainment systems.
Volkswagen, for example, had big problems with the software trying to hold together its EVs, and they've looked to China to help solve that. And I think that's a really important part of the story that you don't hear much about.
There are a number of new technology businesses that have entered the automotive sector, including Li Car, Xpeng, NIO, Xiaomi, Huawei, Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba are just a few examples.
They're new, they don't have the burden of history, they don't have old factories or not so many old factories to reconfigure, and they have a very fast pace of development.
People now see cars as more than just transportation. They see them as complex technology platforms for providing services and making money. This is part of a paradigm shift in the automotive industry that is being driven by improvements in connectivity, digitization, and consumer tastes. This trend is especially strong in China, where cars are seen more and more as digital add-ons, like tablets or computers on wheels. One major reason for this change is that younger people in China want more and more linked products and services that fit in with their digital lives. Chinese companies were quick to take advantage of this trend, using their knowledge of technology and new ideas to create cutting-edge solutions for cars that meet the needs and wants of tech-savvy customers.
Now are often saying that the Americans and the Europeans produce cars that have inferior software and don't use the latest chip and are not as much on the cutting edge.
Extensive productivity. People think that big state-owned enterprises, SOEs, run by the central government in Beijing, control most of the Chinese economy. This is partly true, but not totally. The truth is that China's car industry is much more complicated and varied, with a wide range of players and ownership structures, from state-owned companies to privately owned businesses. It is true that the central government has some control over certain key industries because it owns or controls big SOEs, such as some automakers. However, China's auto sector is made up of many companies with different ownership structures. China's decentralized approach to economic growth and industrial policy is shown by the fact that many automakers are owned by province or city governments. In addition to businesses owned by the government, there are also many private companies in the car industry. These range from well-known domestic manufacturers to new technology and startup companies. These private companies are a big part of what keeps China's car industry innovative, competitive, and market-moving, which helps it stay alive and competitive on the world stage.
Operating perfectly according to market principles, but if you look at the number of producers, the number of models, it is by far the most competitive market in the world.
You know, they probably will surprise a lot of people, especially given this year's bloodbath, like of pricing pressure, economic headwind. trying to push these vehicles out into the marketplace at lower prices, sacrificing profitability for volume. And so the foreign automakers, they have to look at this and they have to balance. Do I want market share or do I want profitability?
Specifically, the bloodbath that Lei Xing is referring to is the price battle that Tesla initiated in the year 2023. Despite the fact that it began in China, the tremendous competition that exists within the country has significantly accelerated the expansion of automobiles in comparison to various other locations. It is possible for automobile manufacturers to upgrade or renew a vehicle every 2 to 3 years. When comparing generations, there are significant shifts that occur every 5 or 6 years. In China, on the other hand, a refresh can take place in as little as a year, and the manufacturer will sell the new model at a price that is lower than the price of the previous model.
Where kind of the foreign automakers, because of that legacy, they can't keep up.
Additionally, Elon Musk is not the only CEO that engages with clients on social media. Chief executive officers from China also engage in this activity on well-known websites such as Weibo and TikTok. They even ask for feedback directly from clients through the apps that they use to interact with and take care of their vehicles, which results in feedback loops that are quite tight. According to Michael Dunn, who has spent a significant amount of time researching the automotive industry in China and its neighboring countries, politics is another factor that contributes to these shifts.
2017, it was the year in which GM and South Korea signed this agreement to supply South Korea with anti-missile defense facilities. Important ones. China didn't like that. And since then, we've seen the sales and market share of both the Detroit 3 and the Korean automakers just nosedive. No one made an announcement and said, hey, you guys are in trouble, you're going to be shoved out of the market. But it's pretty clear that 2017 was a time in which the tide turned and the usefulness of the Detroit 3 just sort of began to fade as far as the Chinese are concerned.
At the same time, a great many of the regulations that the Chinese government used to adhere to, such as mandatory joint ventures, have been gradually relaxed or eliminated entirely.
Foreign automakers, they have to look at this and they have to balance. Do I want market share or do I want profitability?
What's next?
I don't want to sound overly dramatic. I just want to be realistic when I say that within the next 5 years, Ford, GM, Hyundai, Kia, Nissan, more likely than not, will be out of China.
Automakers like Volkswagen are putting in place strategic plans to speed up innovation and make it easier to make decisions because they know how important it is to stay competitive in the Chinese market, which is changing quickly. By working with local businesses, Volkswagen hopes to use their knowledge of the local market and the rules that govern it to get around problems quickly and adapt to changing customer tastes. Volkswagen was the first foreign business to set up shop in China. It has strong ties to and a lot of experience in the Chinese market, which helps it adapt to changing conditions and stay ahead of the competition. Working with local partners helps Volkswagen be more flexible and quick to respond, which speeds up the rollout of strategic initiatives and new products that are specifically designed to meet the needs and tastes of Chinese customers. Tesla, on the other hand, has taken advantage of its ability to operate freely in China without the need for a joint venture. This is because trade rules have been loosened, and Tesla is a leader in electric vehicle technology. Because of this strategic edge, Tesla has been able to quickly grow its manufacturing capacity and become a strong player in the Chinese market. Now, more than half of all Tesla cars sold around the world are made in China. Even though Tesla had a lot of success at first, it faces big problems in the very competitive and quickly changing car market, just like other industry leaders. Some of these problems are uncertain rules, problems in the supply chain, and tougher competition from both local and foreign companies.
7 years of living and working in China, what I've seen is a consistent pattern. That is, China invites in world-class companies, learns as quickly as they can the secret superpowers of those companies, and then gradually and almost methodically sees them to the exit door. And so Tesla one day will also meet this fate. You can bank on it.
Having worked as an executive at Chrysler in the past, Russo is optimistic that American businesses would not withdraw from the Chinese market, but will instead invest more money in the design, development, and production of their products while in China.
Most of the global automakers have delayed the investment in EV because they don't see Americans embracing the electric vehicle.
According to him, it is possible for foreign corporations to continue to compete in the market and possibly even win certain games.
Stay in the game in the next 3 to 5 years. Don't give up, right? Invest and find some way to introduce those products, maybe even build them in China if you can't find scale in the United States. And then you at least have the hedge on the possibility of competing with China as they go forward.